Thanks, Dr. Now. Thanks, Dr. Now. Thank you all for coming. It's a privilege to speak with y'all. This is the third year, as Dr. Now was saying, we've offered a topic related to food and health, and which is really foundational for health. So it's kind of been a journey. A couple of years ago, we gave a presentation challenging some of the traditional paradigms that we've all been brought up with about food, kind of challenge you to read and think a little bit more. And that led us to actually write a grant to the School of Medicine to engage medical students in learning how to cook, and through learning how to cook, to learn about nutrition. How many of y'all go to doctors and they talk about, specifically about correct ways to eat? Yeah, maybe one hand. Yeah, so it's not a common thing. How many of y'all think it's important? Yeah, you wouldn't be here right now. But last year, so that was kind of step one. But we live in a community that access to healthy food is not always there for folks who don't have reasonable income. And so there's a large number of folks in our counties on what's called SNAP, which used to be the old food stamp, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And they call it food insecurity, where access to healthy food and the cost could be a barrier to you maintaining your health or even treating disease. So food is actually treatment for a lot of diseases, reducing bad food and supplementing good food. So we put a grant in last year with the assistance. So last year, Gus Schumacher, who was the former Secretary of Agriculture under President Clinton, came, and he works with a group now called Wholesome Wave. And Wholesome Wave is working nationally now to bring healthy food into inner city, rural, underserved areas. And he gave a presentation kind of at the national level about what's going on. And I talked about some of the things we were doing here locally. So we joined forces and put a grant into the USDA to apply for $100,000 to double SNAP dollars, so they have a card at farmer markets. So if you have $20 on your SNAP card, now it becomes $40. So it helps the economy, helps people eat healthier. And then when you go to, and we call it the pharmacy with an F, because when I go and talk to a farmer about what do I do with this green thing, I learn something. So tonight you'll have the opportunity. I was walking in one of the back rooms and there was some cauliflower mixed with some stuff. I wouldn't have a clue what to do with cauliflower, but it's really not too difficult. Go and learn a few things. So, but what was really cool about that is West Virginia University and another group I work with, Freedom's Run, which is a race that we put on to raise money for local causes. We put in another $30,000 to match in and have more of these double value coupons. So that's coming. It's probably about a month out till we actually get all the tools to make this work at the farmer markets. But be on the lookout. It'll be at Morgan Grove, Shepherdstown Market, Charlestown Market, and then we're going to have a mobile market that's going to probably go to downtown Martinsburg and then be at the VA. But that's all I want to thank you again, and keep spreading the love of eating healthy.
Thanks, Dr. Cucuzella. So the word MedChefs actually is one of those acronyms that stands for Medical Curriculum in Health, Exercise, and Food Science. And you're not going to see any white coats of doctors today. You're going to see different attire. So I'm going to let the team introduce themselves. We are in the second full year, completing the second full year of this curriculum, which won a grant from the School of Medicine when Dean Ross challenged the three campuses to come up with innovations in medical education, and we were awarded one of those. So I'm going to let the MedChefs team take it away.
Hello, and thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Rosie Camarella Lorenzetti. I'm the Associate Dean for Student Services here in the Eastern Division, and I'm also a family doc. I'm a professor of family medicine, and Dr. Now and I started our practice back in 1982, so we've been here a long time. And what I was going to do here is, so from the educational point of view, you always start a lecture with what are you hoping to get out of this lecture? Those are called objectives. So what we're going to do tonight is challenge you to look at the food pyramid in a little different way. We're going to talk a little bit about calories in, calories out. What does that mean? You're going to learn about metabolic syndrome. And we have some practical tips about grocery shopping and meal planning. And then one of our students is going to talk about what the class meant to her, and one of our residents will kind of go over the educational curriculum. And then lastly, we have 15 students here that are making 3 separate kinds of foods, and we invite you to stay and try all of their foods, and we have recipes that go along with the foods, and what are the good things in each of those dishes. So this is the food pyramid that most of us grew up with. Remember, a typical breakfast might be 2 pieces of toast, eggs, maybe a side of grits or potatoes, glass of orange juice. And then for lunch, you would always have a sandwich, a cookie, maybe a small bag of chips and some carrots or fruit. And then I'm Italian, so for dinner we had pasta and meatballs, always had garlic bread, salad, and then usually my father wanted a dessert. Does that sound like a lot of food? That's pretty much what most people eat, and it actually follows the food pyramid pretty well. It's about 11 servings from your bread, cereal, and grain group. I mentioned 2 fruits, I mentioned 2 vegetables, and 3 proteins. But this isn't the way we really want people to eat anymore. And if it was simple, like just everybody take an apple a day, that would be great. But what a healthy diet might be for me, because I'm overweight and I have metabolic syndrome, which you'll hear about in a minute, is very different for what the diet would be for Dr. Cucuzella, who also has a 10-letter last name, but has a 3% body fat and runs every day. So a healthy diet for him is a very different healthy diet for me. So there is no one real diet, and that's why we go with guidelines. Now it's interesting because back in the 60s there was this physiologist. He actually wasn't a medical doctor, Dr. Ansel Keys, and he's the one that first started the heart disease comes from saturated fat and cholesterol sort of belief. And he actually created a study to fit his hypothesis, actually. And the American Heart Association kind of picked up on that right away. Oh yeah, we have all this heart disease because of the saturated fat and cholesterol in our diet. So in 1984, Time magazine is when the federal government started out with dietary guidelines for Americans. The first one was printed in 1980. And in those dietary guidelines, they said, all Americans, you have to have a low saturated fat diet and a very low cholesterol diet to be healthy. We worry about your hearts. So these were national guidelines. And the thoughts were, if you reduce those fat calories, then we'd all end up being normal weight. So what happened then was the big movement to take fat out of the foods. You know, you have to have the skim milk, you have to have the low-fat cheese. And I remember once when I was studying, I ate an entire box of Entenmann's non-fat apple turnovers because there wasn't any fat in those things. They're probably all right. I'm going to eat all 12 of those things when I was studying. So, like a lot of other people and like a lot of other things, when you take fat out of something, you have to put something in. And what they put in are sugars and other carbohydrates. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that as our night goes on as well. And then what did the statistics show? They took out all that fat, and the heart incidence went up, and obesity went up, and diabetes went up. So something was wrong with that picture. So then in 1999, the egg made the cover of Time magazine again. And this time they said, well, you know, maybe that cholesterol isn't so bad for you. Maybe it's those trans fats that are in that food that are so bad for you. And meanwhile, even though that Dr. Keys was so astute in getting everybody to buy onto his theory, there were a lot of other things going on in that same 40-year time period where people, back in 1970, an English researcher said, I think it's the sugar in the foods. And then even in 2000, in the Journal of the Medical Association, which is the journal, highest journal in my group for doctors, said, I think it has something to do with that sugar and the high levels of insulin. So we knew that there was some other things going on. Until finally, even as far back as 2010, the official guidelines still said reduce your cholesterol, reduce your fat. And the new guidelines are due out any day. I tried this afternoon to hook into the 2015, and they're still sort of in a public review thing right now. Public actually had chances to comment on the 2015 guidelines that are coming out. But of course, now the final thing will probably be cholesterol is okay. And as a matter of fact, you probably need fat every day. So Time took again butter and says butter's back. Now, does that mean we can be like Homer Simpson and eat a whole pound of butter? I think he's actually smoking the butter there. That's a different kind of high. But eating a whole ton of saturated fat probably isn't necessarily good for us. Not a whole ton. But I love this heart that I found in a magazine, and I think this is sort of the hallmark of what we're trying to teach the students. For heart health, you eat a rainbow of fruits and vegetables, because we know that black grapes give you different micronutrients than an orange cantaloupe, which gives you something different than a white onion or garlic. So we know that we should, I have patients that will say, well, I said, do you eat any fruits and vegetables? Well, I eat carrots and apples. Okay. Do you eat anything else? No. So they're not eating from the rainbow. So you want to think about eating from the rainbow for heart health. So we're transitioning from the pyramid to what we call the healthy plate. And we stole this from Harvard. They said it was okay. And so we have for everybody in the audience tonight a healthy plate. And what you see on the healthy plate is on the right side, half the meal is fruits and vegetables. Half the meal. So the government plate down there, half the meal is fruits and vegetables as well. But they have more grains on their plate than we do. We have a little more protein. And this plate is very nice because it gives you very specific directives. Like it says, yeah, potatoes and french fries are vegetables, but they don't count as a vegetable. They count as a starch. And then on the back of your healthy plate are just some general guidelines. Green means go, and red means stop and think about it. And then just some general things. These are all the lessons that we teach the students. I mean, one of the things on here says, be mindful when you're eating. You shouldn't be eating like I did 12 Pentamin cakes when you're studying. Because that's not being mindful. And we all overeat when we're not thinking about it. So just some very simple guidelines for you. So next up is Dr. Adrienne Zavala.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Adrienne Zavala. I am also a family doctor at Harvard School of Family Medicine, and I joined the MedChefs faculty. I enjoy eating healthy, and I try to implement that for my family, so it's been a really interesting challenge to kind of pass that along to the medical students, and I hope you guys enjoy learning about what we've been teaching them this evening. So each day as primary care physicians, we are faced with the health concerns that come from the American diet that Dr. Canarella has described and from the obesity epidemic. These are various images that we just got off of the internet of patients, unfortunately kind of typical patients, who come to their primary care doctor. And here you can see that obesity can be measured, let me try to use this as a pointer, by weight, of course, on a scale. It can also be measured by waist circumference, and it can contribute to lots of different medical problems, including high blood pressure. Incidentally, I am using the word obesity. Dr. Canarella used it some, and I think some of you may think that that's a derogatory term, might even be offended by that. We use it because it is the medical technical definition for the condition that these patients pictured here suffer from. Sometimes we do have to take that into account when we're talking to patients, and we will sometimes use different terminology like overweight, but you will hear us using both terms throughout the rest of the talk. So when these patients come to their physician and they want advice about their weight and about diet and about nutrition, what kinds of things do we tell them? What kinds of things have you heard from your doctors? I think historically and up to very recently, many of us have advised our patients using the phrase calories in, calories out. In other words, if you burn more calories by exercising than you take in your diet, you will have a net negative calorie balance and you will lose weight. That's been our historic advice. But there is at least one very fundamental error in that advice that we're going to discuss a little bit this evening. The pie charts in the top left there reflect Jefferson County, West Virginia data, just in case there was any doubt as to whether this epidemic has hit home for us. So the fundamental problem with advising patients to count calories and adjust their calorie in, calorie out balance in order to lose weight is that it turns out that not all calories are created equal. A calorie is not a calorie, is kind of the mantra that we use with the students sometimes. Your body's response to the calories that come from different foods actually can be very different. So your body's response to foods that are high in fiber, high in protein, high in healthy fats is very different from your body's response to foods that are high in carbohydrates, specifically high in sugar, and foods that are highly processed. So a serving of each of these foods pictured here is equal to about 100 to 120 calories. But your body processes them entirely differently, such that the calories that come from an apple, a serving of salmon, a handful of almonds, or a green salad are far superior to the calories you would get from a bag of chips, which would immediately in your body be converted into sugar and then stored as fat. So although the calorie number here is about the same for each food, your body's response to that and your insulin level and your weight response to that is going to be very different. Many of you, I think, are probably familiar with the metabolic syndrome and know that it is a syndrome that includes high blood sugar, high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol, and obesity. Dr. Canarella spoke a lot about the major diet change that has happened over the last several decades in the United States, such that foods that are low in fat are preferred. So many of the foods that you find in the store that are called low fat or fat-free, if you look at those very closely, you will find that the reason they're low fat and fat-free is that the fat has been replaced by sugar in many, many different forms. So there are currently major concerns about this dietary change in the United States and the shift that our diets have taken. And some of them are listed here. So high carbohydrate diets have been found to actually decrease our blood levels of HDL, which is healthy cholesterol. This is the cholesterol that can be protective against heart disease. So high carbohydrate diets can decrease your HDL levels. Maybe that's one of the reasons that heart disease is increasing as we're eating less and less fat. High carbohydrate diets directly increase your blood sugar levels, which then increases your blood insulin levels, and insulin is a growth factor and causes increased weight gain. Also, triglyceride levels, which is another blood fat, are also increased by high carbohydrate diets, as well as blood pressure. We know that part of the metabolic syndrome is insulin resistance, which may be more simply understood as carbohydrate intolerance. And there is a very clear link between insulin resistance / carbohydrate intolerance and diabetes, which then is a major risk for heart disease. Metabolic syndrome, you can see pictured here in the bottom left, is associated, as I said, with heart disease. This one says lipid problems, so that would be high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and diabetes, but it's also linked to these other very serious health problems that are major issues in the U.S. population. This one says dementia, cancer, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This graphic shows another reason that we are teaching that a calorie is not a calorie, that all calories are not created equal, and that this actually depicts why it's different to eat a bunch of carbohydrates than to eat other kinds of foods. So this lady is eating her lunch, which is a maybe supersized value meal or something. It is a sandwich with 2 big pieces of bread. It is a large serving of fries, it's a Coke, and then I can't tell what that other thing is, but let's say it's some cookies or some sort of sweets. So she is challenging her body with this huge carb load. And the response, the physiologic response that's normal in the body when we eat a lot of carbohydrates is that our blood insulin level shoots up. That has several different ramifications, but the one depicted here is that insulin then goes to the brain and blocks the signal from a hormone called leptin. Leptin is really important because it's one of the hormones that tells our body when we're full. It tells us when we should stop eating. So the problem here is that if we eat high carbohydrate diets, then the insulin that's produced blocks the signal from leptin. We don't think we're full, and we eat more. That's driving obesity even further. The top left, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about, but I just wanted to say that this depicts the fact that on the molecular level in the brain, sugar acts pretty much exactly like a drug to which one can become addicted. So the fact is that the more sugar we eat, the more our brain thinks we need to eat more sugar in order to produce that same satisfaction or that same pleasure response, which is pretty scary. All of these slides were taken from a video that is available free on YouTube called The Skinny on Obesity. It's produced and narrated by Dr. Robert Lustig, who is a pediatric endocrinologist out of California. And we found this video so stimulating and interesting that we actually have taken the time in the MedChefs curriculum to show it in its entirety to the medical students. And it is available in very short episodes on YouTube, so if you have some time, you might want to check it out. As we change, Dr. Morshell is going to come for the next section, but as we switch out, if this works, it didn't work. We were going to play a little teaser introduction to one of the Lustig videos, but you might have to just check it out on YouTube.
Thank you, Dr. Zavala. I'm Sarah Morshell. I'm a pediatrician. I also work at Harper's Ferry Family Medicine. I'm an associate professor of pediatrics, and I'm the clerkship director in charge of teaching the medical students about how to take care of children. And it's been a pleasure to be a part of the MedChefs curriculum. It's been really, really fun. All right. So we know that a lot of our patients either have metabolic syndrome or are at risk of metabolic syndrome. So at the beginning of the year, before we started this program with our current third-year students, we asked them, okay, put yourself in the shoes of the doctor that you will become. What are you going to say to your patients? And they came up with many of the things that you've probably heard. Eat less sugar, exercise more. And as we were discussing it, they realized that that's really not helpful information, that what they really wanted to learn was, what am I supposed to say that is going to be helpful and meaningful? Sorry, there are so many things up here to click. I have to pick the right one. So one of the things we taught the students in the big picture of things was the vocabulary that one needs to talk about food and to talk about nutrition with patients. So we talked about nutrition labels, we took them to the grocery store, and we had them plan some meals. And by going through that process, they learned many more of the things that they could actually say that would be useful in an encounter with a patient. So we taught them about the nutrition label, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this, the serving size at the top and the number of servings per container, which can be a little bit tricky. Many products appear to be a single serving, but it's actually 2 servings. Sodas, for example, the 20-ounce sodas. We have the number of calories. I'm just going to go over and point. So the number of calories in the green section there is helpful. The fat section is interesting, so we're used to thinking that we need to have as little fat as possible, but actually some fat is good, some saturated fat is good. Trans fat, not so much, but having some fat is actually okay. The carb section becomes really important. So they'll tell us the total carbs in a food, but the dietary fiber, is really important to look at, and I think that's often overlooked. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of calories with fiber and calories without fiber. As with everything, things are changing as we have more knowledge and more information about nutrition. So on the left is the current FDA labeling system. On the right is something you may be seeing. This is the 2014 proposed FDA label, which I thought was really interesting. So front and center, how many servings are actually in this container? And then in big numbers, how many calories are in each serving, which makes it much more apparent to us what we're eating and what the serving size should be. As you know, over time, our perception of serving size has changed and gotten bigger. The other change on here is that the daily value, so the percent of your daily intake that's coming from this particular serving of food, is on the left, where people are more likely to look at it, because it's more valuable to know, okay, by having this, I've had 12% of what I need from this category today. It's more helpful sometimes than the actual number of grams in the serving itself. So that'll be interesting, and perhaps that'll change some before it actually is published and standardized, but that's what they're proposing at this time. So sugar is really tricky. Sugar has many names. They don't just call it sugar, right? So let's go over a couple of these. So cane juice, dehydrated cane juice, cane solids, cane juice crystals. Okay, you would probably know that because it has cane and we figure sugar cane. All right, but then there's dextrin, maltodextrin, dextran, barley malt, beet sugar, which you might confuse for a vegetable, but it's just the sugar and not the fiber, corn syrup solids, caramel, high fructose corn syrup, which actually isn't on there, buttered syrup, carob syrup, brown sugar, date sugar, which sounds like maybe that's a fruit, malt syrup, diastase, I don't even know what that is, diastatic malt. Now we're getting to the things that sound like they might actually be bad. Fruit juice, that sounds all right. Fruit juice concentrate, dehydrated fruit juice crystals, golden syrup, turbinado, sorghum syrup, refiner syrup, ethyl maltol, maple syrup, and yellow sugar. So, an interesting thing to do. So if you look at the label and you're looking for sugar or you're looking for corn syrup, it's pretty easy to see in the label, all right, is this one of the first or second ingredients, or is it further down the list? Because you know they have to put the ingredients in order of the amount that's in them. So whatever is the most is the first ingredient. But there are many, many things like granola bars, for example, with some of this and some of that and some of this and some of that and some of the other, and they maybe have 6 or 8 different kinds of sugar. And if you add them all up, all of a sudden, that's what actually there is the most of in your food. So it's interesting and just something to be mindful of. We're going to have a quiz later to see how many of those you can recall. So as we were talking with the students about limiting sugars in their food, and fruit juice was one of the things that came up, and fruit came up, they very astutely asked the question, well, okay, what about those natural sugars? Does this mean I can't eat anything that has fructose in it? And the answer is no, fruit is very good for you. And here's an illustration of this. So a cup of apple juice has 10 grams of sugar. A raw apple also has 10 grams of sugar. One of the major differences between those two is that the apple has 2 grams of fiber. And that fiber slows down your digestion and allows those sugars to enter the system more slowly so that you don't have a big spike of sugar that needs to be met by a big spike of insulin. We can measure something called the glycemic load, which measures this sugar spike and insulin type of response. For apple juice, this is a high glycemic load compared with the raw apple, which has a low glycemic load. So the take-home message here is these sugars are okay, but you have to eat your sugar, not drink your sugar when you're comparing the apple and the apple juice. Same with oranges. Eat your oranges, perhaps don't drink the orange juice. And similarly with many of the processed flours, processed rice, white rice versus wheat rice, the more fiber it has to balance that sugar, to allow your body to absorb it more slowly, the more healthy the response is going to be. All right, so we armed our students with the vocabulary and these thoughts about sugar. We taught them about vegetables and fruits, and we took them to the grocery store. So one thing that people will sometimes suggest is doing perimeter shopping. So if you just go around the outside of the grocery store, you can hit the fruits, the veggies, the meat, the dairy, and then you can check out. And if you can avoid all the stuff in boxes in the middle of the store, you've probably had a pretty healthy shop. So that's one simple tip. The students went there with Joan Starlether, who is our dietitian from Berkeley Medical Center, and we really appreciated her willingness to help us teach them as well. So they learned about the WIC program, they learned about the SNAP program, talked about certain barriers that exist in good nutrition. And so for families who have financial barriers, we discussed ways that those can be overcome. We talked about serving sizes and labels. And we tasked the students with, okay, if you had a budget of $20 to make dinner for a family of 4, what are you going to make? What are you going to suggest? And I'd like to share 2 of their recipes with you. I know I get in the habit of making the same 5 things for dinner every week, and sometimes it's hard to make a change. So my thought was I'd like to share these menus with you, perhaps to sort of stimulate some other ideas in your mind of things that you might do. And you can imagine if your doctor is able to talk with you about not just could you eat less, but have you tried salmon with green beans, or have you tried putting all these things together as a salad, then that doctor has told you something useful that you might be able to do more easily at home. So one menu was salmon with ginger, sort of an Asian theme to that flavor, with green beans, and quinoa with peppers. And for dessert, this family would have grilled peaches with Greek yogurt. Sounds pretty good. How many people have eaten or cooked with quinoa? All right, excellent. Good, so quinoa is an ancient grain that has a lot of fiber and some protein. So if it's side by side with enriched white rice, certainly that's a really good healthy choice. One of the other groups came up with chef salad that included chicken, hard-boiled eggs, cheese, carrots, cucumbers, and mixed greens. And for dessert, they suggested that this family might have cantaloupe. So if your food looks like this, what's not to like, right? So rainbow-ish. I couldn't find a picture that had our exact menu, but here's some salmon with a whole grain and a whole bunch of vegetables. Here's a salad with a bunch of different things on it. And I think those are actually lamb chops, which probably wouldn't fit into the $20 for a family of 4 budget, but it was really beautiful with whole grains and a salad on the side as well. I want to make one last point, and that is, if you look at how beautiful that food is, and think about the cantaloupe and the grilled peaches with Greek yogurt for dessert, it all sounds and looks really delicious. About 2 years ago, Dr. Kukazela challenged one of our middle school students to spend $50 on healthy food and $50 on unhealthy food to see what he would come up with. And he came up with this great balance of really, really healthy stuff, all of which has either been eaten or is long since rotten because it was 2 years ago. But from the bag of unhealthy food, we still have in perfect condition, the Martin's brand old-fashioned chocolate chip cookies, not looking a day beyond when they were baked. Peeps, still soft.
Tell them they were in my garage.
Oh, that's right. And they're not only 2 years old, they've actually been in Dr. Cucuzello's garage for the last 2 years, getting really hot and really cold as the seasons go by. And this Pop Tart, we opened this one up just to see. So it was bought 2 years ago. The box says it expired a year ago. But look, fresh as a daisy. So it's, when you're thinking about wanting to give your body something healthy, and you've got the option of this beautifulness, it's something very different to think about a lot of the things that we do tend to buy, or that people do tend to buy. All right. So up next is Madison Humrick.
Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Madison Humrick. I'm one of the resident physicians in the family medicine program at Harper's Ferry. And so I had the pleasure of starting with MedChefs as a 4th year student when they were just developing the curriculum for the 3rd year. So I kind of got to tag along. I was in the store in that picture carrying the coffee. So I was tasked with showing you a little bit of the recommendations for exercise and really trying to keep a common sense type of attitude when we talk about physical activity in your daily life. So I thought it would be fun to show you some of the things we do to stay active. I'm up there on the left playing soccer. I still track with my husband, and I walk my dogs. You can see Dr. Cucuzella doing his thing there. Dr. Zavala with her kids on the Sino. And then Dr. Lorenzetti over there with Ralph, her husband, while they were out skiing. So if you think about your daily routine and you think, okay, I'm going to try and exercise for 30 minutes today, and you put it up there, that's only 2% of your day. If you sleep for 8 hours, that's a third of your day. But how many of us really get 8 hours? So that leaves 65% or more of your day that you're doing what? We're sitting here in a lecture, we're sitting at work at our computer. I mean, you think about all that time that really you could be involving in some daily movement. I want to stress to you in this next few minutes that exercise doesn't have to be just that 30 minutes a day that you're exercising. It can be a part of your daily movement, your daily routine. And the more you can kind of have that common sense attitude, the better your health will be overall as you go forward. So let's talk about the 2%. So the American Heart Association put this together just to give you a guideline of what they think is some good exercise guidelines here. So they want you to get at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity activity, and I'll share with you examples of that, at least 5 days of the week. Or you can do the 25 minutes of some vigorous activity. I'll give you examples of that as well, for 3 days of the week. So you can do either of those and add 2 days in where you do some high intensity or more vigorous strengthening exercise during the week. So what are examples of those? So if you think about energy, what you're doing right now, just sitting and resting, that's one, what we call metabolic equivalent. That's what the MET stands for. So right now we're at about a 1. So if you want to do some light activity, that's kind of walking slowly, you're sitting and doing something at the computer, you're cooking a meal, and then underneath that in blue, I've put kind of, if some of you think in terms of calories, it gives you a little bit of an equivalent to think of. And then if you move into more moderate activities, kind of take it up a notch. You're going to walk a little faster. You're going to start really scrubbing the car, maybe mowing the lawn. For some of you, that might be a vigorous activity. Playing some tennis, I don't know, that could be vigorous too. And then when you move into vigorous activity, that's some big stuff. That's you're jogging a little faster. You're out there shoveling that big snow that we had this past winter. You're on a bike, and that 14 to 16 miles per hour is pretty fast. I just did that last week. That's moving. Playing some soccer, and then underneath that you can see as you go up in metabolic equivalents, or as you get more vigorous in your exercise, your calories do increase, the amount that you burn. But I do want to warn you, just like eating a calorie is not the same for all the foods that you eat. Exercising that amount of calories is not the same for everybody either. So if Dr. Kugazella and I go out and run, his fitness level is higher than mine. So he's going to continue to burn calories throughout the day more than I will, because I'm not in as good a shape. He can help me. So when you look at those calories, just keep in mind that what you see there isn't always what you get. So you might think, gosh, I worked out so hard today, but I'm just not losing weight. Well, as you build your fitness and as you get more fit in your daily routine, you increasing your activity, you're going to start to burn more calories throughout your day. And you're going to increase the amount of calories you burn doing the same activity that you did. So it'll come. So I'm going to give you, in a few minutes, I'm going to give you a chance to practice some of these things. But I want to talk about now, that was your 2% of your day. That was your, okay, I'm going to get out there for 30 minutes. This is the 65% of your day. So how can I increase the amount of stuff that I do that's active? Some easy things you can do, and I'll show you in a minute, is change your posture. It's so easy to add in some activity by just changing the way you sit, changing the way you stand. The way you breathe. A lot of us are shallow breathers. We get anxious and we kind of hunch over and get into this fast breathing pattern. You can work on your balance and ability and strength. All these things can happen without you even having to think about it. Other ways you can increase the amount of activity you get. Add some walking in your day. Walk before breakfast. Walk at lunch. Find a buddy that you like to walk with. Instead of picking up the phone at work to call the person in the next office, get up and walk. Get up and walk to your neighbor's house and talk to them. Some of you might have seen these standing desks you can get. And they can be adjustable too, so as you stand during the day, you get a little fatigue, you can then sit for a little bit, but then get right back into it. So you can work your way up as you stand during the day. Some people get a little bit spunky and they get a treadmill, walking desk. It takes a little bit of time to get used to, but it has been shown to actually decrease cholesterol in some of the studies, so it does work. Get a pet. Dogs, you have to walk them. They don't like to be inside. They'll kind of force you to be active. Go play with your kids. Instead of watching your kids play soccer or watching them play baseball, get involved. AYSO would love to have more soccer coaches, more referees. They don't care how much experience you have. You can go dancing. Find a dance class that's local. Do it with your spouse. Anytime you have a partner in crime, it helps you get into it. And they force you to be accountable. And that's important. So now for the fun part. You didn't think you'd get an exercise class today, but you are. So before I make you stand up, I just want everybody to get off the back of your seat. We sit all day long. I want you to follow Kayla right here. Sit up off your seat, kind of pull from the top of your head. So you're kind of lengthening your spine, and you're setting your head through the middle of your spine. You don't really know it, but your head weighs a lot. So when you hunch back in your seat, your neck and your shoulders are carrying the weight of your head. So anybody with neck and shoulder problems, anybody out there have neck shoulder pain? Try doing this at work. It works. I'm telling you, get your spine working. Immediately takes the tension off. All right, while you're sitting there, hands on your knees. I want everyone to stand up without using their handrail, if you can. Difficult. Great. When you did that, you already felt your butt muscles work, your glutes. You felt your hamstrings working. Did everybody feel it? It's difficult. It takes a lot of muscle strength. You're feeling your abs work. Now while you're standing, I want everybody to kind of shoulder width apart your feet. Pull from the top of your head again. You want your head over the center of your spine. You can feel your spine lengthen. Kind of tilt your hips a little bit. And you do this by tucking your butt under and tilting your pelvis. So you should feel your abs work too. So now I have my whole spine engaged. All right? Now we're going to loosen up that fascia. So we're going to do a thumbs up sign out to your side. We're going to do a little bit of shoulder rolls. It might be difficult. You can spread out miles. Just feel your shoulders start to loosen up. As we loosen up this fascia here, you should start to feel really good. All right. Next thing I'm going to teach you is some breathing exercises. And Dr. Kuzella taught me this in one of his classes. So we're going to do some belly breathing. This really helps when you're anxious. Some of you might have lung disease or COPD. And we do this with our patients at the hospital. We just teach them to breathe really deeply, kind of get their whole lung involved in breathing. And it slows the heart rate as you do it. So as you breathe deep and use your belly, you start to relax and feel really good. So hand on your chest, one hand and one hand on your belly. All right, you want to breathe in through your nose and feel your chest and your belly rise at the same time. And then out through your mouth. Do a few of those. All right, a few more. Awesome. So these are things you can do throughout your entire day. You just worked on your abs, you worked on your back, you worked on your breathing, and it will really change your life. It'll make your mood better too. So I hope you can just start there. Okay? These are some resources for you to use. And if any of you have specific questions on exercise, Dr. Gazelle will be right here too.
Dr. Humor, it's a nice act to follow when you have to speak in public, because now I've gotten to do some deep breathing exercises. I'm just a little less anxious. But I'm Kayla Ainsworth. I'm a fourth-year medical student. I was part of the first class as a third-year medical student to have the opportunity to go through this MedChefs curriculum. So I just have a few slides here. I'm just going to say a few words about how our lessons were given. We did kitchen cooking classes, and then give you some ideas on the lessons we learned, and then some student feedback.
Down button. Yes.
So this is just telling you a little bit about our cooking sessions that we did. As students, we had the opportunity to actually get out in the community and learn how to cook some healthy recipes. So we partnered with Blue Ridge Community Technical College and worked with Stephen Weiss. He's a chef there that teaches the in the culinary program at CTC. So the way this worked is, along with our lectures that we would have in the MedChef curriculum, we did 4 teaching sessions throughout the year. Each one was anywhere from 2.5 to 3 hours long. The kitchen was set up a lot like a classroom. Chef Stephen would be in the front, and then there were tables set up. The students were in pairs. Each of us had our own recipe booklet, ingredients for the meals we were making for the day, all the tools we needed. Chef Stephen, throughout these lessons, of course, taught us how to make these healthy meals, gave some tips on how to cut things properly, and different tips on how to prepare foods differently. The neat thing was that at the end of each session, we actually had the opportunity to sit down and try the meals that we prepared.
So I wanted to give you this is really just a sample of some of the recipes that we had a chance to make. Each teaching session had a lesson in mind, and so one of the things we did was we did an entire session on what are some healthy alternative ingredients that we can add to some traditional meals that we make. So one of the things, I believe this was done in the fall around Thanksgiving, we made a cottage pie with mashed sweet potato crust and with lean turkey meat and vegetables. So the sweet potato was supposed to be the substitute for a traditional, flour type crust. The sweet potatoes are high in potassium, and then we use turkey meat, which is said to be leaner than ground beef. And another option you could use as well is like an oatmeal type crust if you have to have that crust for your cottage pie. The other thing that was one of my favorites is we did a few lessons on how to do some dressings and dips. So one thing that I've actually been using a lot since we did this curriculum is using Greek yogurt in place of mayonnaise. It's creamy, it's high in protein, and it's delicious. One of the other things was deviled eggs. So instead of using all of the yolk to make your filling, we actually pureed some white beans and added some of the yolk, and then added it back to the egg to make your deviled eggs. This is just another little snippet here. My class didn't do this, but the third-year class you're going to meet tonight made homemade granola. And the advantage of doing this is that, granola can be good for you, but a lot of the granola we buy in the store has processed sugars, has a lot of added sugars in it. So they make granola with just your basic ingredients: eggs, honey, steel-cut oats, nuts, and things like that. No preservatives. This is another favorite of mine. So we talked a lot about how do we get more vegetables in our diet. As Dr. Canarella had mentioned, that's one of the goals of trying to teach patients and teach people how to eat better, getting rid of less carbs and adding more vegetables into our diet. One of the lessons that we did during the fall was how can we add more vegetables in our diet during the fall and winter months where, farmers markets aren't as available. Fruits and vegetables don't seem to be as plentiful when it's not in the warm season. And so we focused a lot on what can we do with root vegetables. So we made some really delicious ingredients with carrots, parsnips, rutabagas, and we roasted those with a little bit of olive oil and rosemary. It was delicious. We were also taught how to blanch vegetables. I never worked with broccoli raw. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. I've never had it. It's delicious. And we actually, I believe we made that with a dip, or it was made with white beans. It was really good. Then we made a delicious butternut squash soup. And then another interesting thing, it's difficult to think about how am I going to add more vegetables into my breakfast. So making an egg frittata with peppers, onions, mushrooms, whatever you like, or an omelet for breakfast. And then another thing that I want to try, which the third year students got to do this year, I didn't get to do, was a spinach mix with ricotta cheese as a filling for peppers. So sort of an alternative to stuffed peppers where you would use beef. And so that's basically it for my part, but I wanted to kind of give you all an idea of the type of feedback that I got. At the end of the year, Dr. Canarella, when she asked me to be a part of this presentation, said, go talk to your peers, get an idea of what they thought, about this whole program. I knew what I thought, and it was, obviously a positive opinion of the program, but the feedback that I got from my peers was overwhelmingly positive. I think that overall we felt that this curriculum gave us practical knowledge that we could apply to counseling our patients about what they should eat, what sorts of things they need to incorporate into their diet. The unfortunate thing about the medical school curriculum is in the first 2 years we do get some knowledge of nutrition, but it's usually a very short course, and it focuses mostly on the biochemistry of vitamin synthesis, things like that, which is all well and good, but patients don't care about how vitamin C is synthesized in the body. It doesn't really matter. They want to know, what am I supposed to eat? How do I get healthy? And so I think that was the big take-home message, and that was the one positive thing that I gained from this experience. So that's it.
Thank you. So we're just about done. And when I was asked for a catchy title for tonight, I came up with green eggs and ham. I knew we'd be talking about fats. And so I wanted to just kind of close out with this. So what we know now, eggs are back in style. Okay, you can have eggs. And actually, eggs are good for us, and we'll actually do better. The one caution was with diabetics that eat a high carb diet, then some of the cholesterol might give them slightly an increased risk, but as long as you don't eat a whole lot of carbs, which if you're diabetic, you shouldn't anyway, the eggs are good. So far for the eggs, we're a yes. So the ham was my metaphor for saturated fats. Now the one thing I forgot when I said that was that ham is a little different than, for example, a nice steak. And what's different about ham is that any food that is smoked or cured or salted and preserved in some way, they use sodium nitrite to do that. And that turns into nitrosamines, which could be carcinogenic. So one thing, we think of ham as being high in fat. Actually, ham is a good, cheap source of protein for people. But overall, you have to be thinking about the luncheon meats. So in my house, I don't buy luncheon meat, I don't buy hot dogs, I don't buy bologna. Because all of those things, because they're preserved, it's the cancer risk more so than the heart risk that you worry about. And I read a lot of articles before tonight, and I think the cancer risk with the nitrates is pretty well defined. Although, this week at Aldi's, I found nitrate-free bacon, which is what I had for Mother's Day. So that's my caution there is, we know that red meat is good for you, actually, and I'd rather see you eat a nice piece of steak than feel like you're having, 5 slices of lunch and ham. Okay, just go out and get a nice little steak or eat the hamburger. We do say that you want to do maybe no more than a couple times a week. And that was where one of the ricotta spinach entree came, because the lesson was Dr. Now had given us, the students, a lesson on geriatric nutrition. And as you go older, you tend to lose some of your taste and smell. I know when my mother-in-law lived with me, all she wanted was glazed donuts and potato chips, because that's what she could taste. So the lesson that we had last time is how do we help older patients get the protein they need, since they sometimes can't chew meat. And that was where the spinach and ricotta came from. It was good quality protein and a vegetable as well.